The kiss happened in front of the entire executive floor, in the bright glare of a Tuesday morning, with cameras flashing, board members staring, and my resignation letter still folded in my trembling hand. 1 minute I was the quiet facilities supervisor everyone overlooked, accused of sabotaging the company's biggest presentation, and the next minute our untouchable CEO, Celeste Waverly, stepped beside me, took my hand like she had been holding it all her life, and told the room, "He's my fiancé." Then she kissed me on the spot, and the whole tower went silent. If you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs a little light today, and subscribe to our channel so our family can keep bringing you stories that remind us love can still appear in the most broken places. My name is Beckett Cole, and until that morning, I was the kind of man people walked past without remembering. I kept the Waverly Innovations building running, fixed conference room screens before investors arrived, unclogged executive espresso machines no one admitted they broke, and learned to disappear before important people noticed the grease under my fingernails. I had once been an engineer with dreams bigger than my paycheck, but after my mother's long illness drained my savings and a failed partnership left me buried under debt, I took whatever steady work I could find. Pride had become a luxury. I wore a navy work shirt with my name stitched over the pocket, carried a ring of keys heavy enough to bruise my hip, and told myself honest work was still honor, even when the world treated it like failure. Celeste Waverly was the opposite of invisible. She was 36, sharp as winter sunlight, and carried herself like every room had to rearrange around her. She had inherited the company after her father's sudden stroke, and half the board seemed determined to prove she was too young, too emotional, or too alone to lead it. I had seen her only in passing at first, striding through the lobby in pale suits, her copper blonde hair pinned back, her face calm in that expensive way people mistake for coldness. But if you worked in the building long enough, you saw the moments nobody else did. You saw her pause by the security desk to ask if the guard's daughter had recovered from pneumonia. You saw her kneel in heels to pick up papers dropped by an intern. You saw her staring through glass walls after meetings, looking less like a queen and more like someone holding a cracking ceiling above everyone's head. The trouble began on the morning of the product launch, when every investor, reporter, and board member was gathered on the top floor to witness the company's new medical logistics platform. It was supposed to save hospitals millions and help rural clinics get life-saving supplies faster, and Celeste had spent 18 months fighting for it. I came in early under clean daylight, carrying a toolbox and a cup of gas station coffee, because the main presentation screen in the grand conference hall had been flickering the day before. When I opened the control cabinet, I found a cable deliberately cut and a small access drive wedged behind the panel. My stomach dropped. I knew enough from my old engineering days to understand it was not a simple malfunction. Someone had planted a failure in the heart of the launch that I should have called security immediately, but fear has a way of turning smart men into cautious men. 2 weeks earlier, I had overheard the chief financial officer, Martin Vale, arguing with a board member near the freight elevator about delaying the launch until Celeste learned her place. When Martin saw me, he smiled like a knife being slid back into a drawer. Since then, small things had happened. My overtime disappeared. My supervisor warned me not to wander. A maintenance request with my login appeared for a restricted server closet I had never entered. So when I found that cut cable, I took photos, replaced the line, and slipped the access drive into my pocket, planning to hand it directly to Celeste after the launch. I thought evidence would protect me. I did not understand that powerful people often prepare the accusation before the crime is even complete. The presentation began at 10 in the morning, and for 20 minutes everything worked perfectly. Celeste stood beneath the huge screen, her voice steady, her eyes bright with exhaustion and hope. I watched from the service corridor, half hidden behind a frosted glass door, feeling a strange pride I had no right to feel. Then Martin stood up and announced that company security had detected unauthorized interference with the system. 2 guards moved toward me before I even understood what was happening. The access logs showed my badge in restricted areas. My fingerprints were on the cabinet, of course, because I had fixed it. The drive was found in my pocket. The whole room turned toward me, and I saw my small life shrinking under their suspicion that I tried to explain, but Martin spoke over me with rehearsed sorrow, saying the company had always trusted support staff and that betrayal hurt most when it came from within. Those words cut deeper than I expected. Not because I cared what he thought, but because everyone believed him so easily. A woman from legal asked if I had been paid by a competitor. A board member muttered that people with financial problems were always vulnerable. My face burned. I thought of my mother's hospital bed, of the bills I had paid by selling my drafting table, of every double shift I had worked so I would never have to beg. I wanted to shout, but the room was full of people who had already decided my silence was guilt and my anger would be proof. Then Celeste walked toward me. She did not rush. She did not look confused. She moved through the room with a strange, devastating calm, stopping only when she was close enough for me to see that her hands were shaking. She asked me, softly enough that only I heard, whether I still had the photos. I nodded, stunned. She took my phone from my hand, opened the images, and her expression changed. It was not surprise. It was confirmation. For one bright second, I understood that she had suspected Martin too, but had needed the missing piece. Before she could speak, Martin raised his voice, warning her that protecting a saboteur would destroy investor confidence. He said the board needed stability. He said the company needed a leader whose judgment was not clouded by loneliness. That was when everything changed. Celeste turned to the room, lifted her chin, and said she trusted me more than anyone in that building. A reporter asked why. Martin laughed once and said trust was not evidence. Celeste looked at him, then at the board, and something fragile but fierce passed across her face, as if she was tired of being cornered by men who mistook her grace for weakness. She reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold, but her grip was steady. She told everyone I was not a random employee, not a desperate man, not a convenient scapegoat. She said I was her fiancé. Gasps moved across the room like wind through dry leaves. I barely had time to breathe before she stepped closer, placed her hand against my cheek, and kissed me. It was not a performance kiss, not exactly. It was brief, warm, and trembling, full of panic and apology and something I could not name. When she pulled away, her eyes met mine with a silent plea so human that my shock softened into understanding. She was not using me to save herself. She was throwing herself into scandal to buy 1 minute of attention, 1 minute in which Martin could not control the story. And in that minute, she connected my phone to the main display. The photos appeared on the screen, the cut cable, the planted drive, the timestamp from before my badge had even entered the executive floor. Then she opened a hidden security feed from a hallway camera facing the cabinet. Martin's assistant appeared in the footage at dawn, crouching exactly where I had later found the evidence. The conference room erupted. Martin's face drained of color, but he tried to recover, claiming the footage was incomplete, claiming Celeste had staged it because she was emotional, unstable, compromised. That last word made her flinch, and I hated him for it. Not because she was my CEO, not because she had just called me her fiancé, but because I recognized the cruelty of a person who knows precisely where to press on someone's wound. So I spoke, not loudly, but clearly. I told them I had overheard Martin discussing the delay. I told them he had threatened my job. I told them I had kept quiet because men like me are taught that survival means swallowing the truth until it poisons us. The room grew still again, and this time the silence did not belong to them. It belonged to US.by noon. Security had escorted Martin out, the board had called an emergency session, and the launch had somehow continued, brighter and stronger because the truth had been dragged into the daylight. Yet the moment the applause ended, shame hit me like a second accusation. I had been kissed in front of strangers, renamed in front of cameras, and pulled into a lie that might ruin both our lives. Celeste found me in the small maintenance workshop behind the service elevators, where I was sitting on an overturned paint bucket with my resignation letter on my knee. Sunlight fell through the high window, catching dust in the air between us. She looked less like a CEO there. She looked like a woman who had won a battle and lost peace in the same breath. She apologized before I could speak. She said she had no right to involve me, no right to make my life a shield against her enemies. She admitted that the board had been pressuring her for months to accept Martin's guidance, his alliances, even his public closeness, because investors trusted a man standing beside her more than they trusted her standing alone. Her father's voting shares were tied up in a clause that allowed the board to challenge her leadership if she was deemed personally compromised or reckless. Martin had planned to frame me, embarrass her, and force her out before the platform launched. Calling me her fiancé had been desperate, reckless, and maybe unforgivable, but it had shifted the room long enough for evidence to breathe that I should have been angry. Part of me was. I told her I had spent years being used by people with nicer shoes and better lawyers. I told her poor men do not get scandals, they get stains that never wash off. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not defend herself. She simply listened, and that made it harder to hate her. Then she said something that stayed with me. She said she had built an entire life around appearing untouchable, but the truth was that she had never felt more alone than at the top. Her father could no longer speak clearly after his stroke. Her mother cared more about society pages than boardroom knives. The people who praised her in public measured her in private. And that morning, when everyone turned on me, she saw the same loneliness on my face. The fake engagement became national business gossip by early afternoon. Photos of the kiss spread before the building's cafe sold out of lunch. Reporters waited by the entrance. Employees whispered near elevators, then went quiet when I passed. Celeste offered to release a statement clearing my name and ending the lie immediately, but I surprised both of us by saying no. Not because I wanted fame, and not because I believed in fairy tales. I said no because Martin still had allies, and if the board believed she had lied under pressure, they would use it to remove her before the investigation finished. For the first time in years, someone powerful had risked herself for me. I could stand beside her for one day in return. That one day became a week of daylight meetings, legal interviews, board reviews, and carefully staged public appearances that felt fake until they slowly stopped feeling fake. Celeste insisted I return to my engineering title temporarily to help audit the sabotage system, and I discovered that my old skills were not dead, only buried under disappointment. She treated my ideas with respect in front of people who had once asked me to adjust thermostats while ignoring my name. She gave credit loudly. She corrected anyone who called me lucky. In return, I saw beyond her polished armor. I saw the way she rubbed her thumb against her father's old watch before difficult meetings. I saw her leave fresh flowers in the employee wellness room after learning one of the cleaners had lost a sister. I saw kindness that had survived pressure without becoming soft, but lies, even protective ones, demand payment. Celeste's mother, Margot, arrived at the office one bright Friday with diamonds at her throat and disappointment in every breath. She looked at me as if poverty were contagious and told Celeste she had confused charity with affection. I expected Celeste to deny it, to distance herself, to remind everyone it was strategy. Instead, she looked at me across the conference room table, and for the first time since the kiss, she seemed afraid of my answer rather than anyone else's. I realized then that somewhere between pretending and surviving, something real had begun growing in the cracks. Not a grand romance born from a kiss, but trust, and trust is far more dangerous because it asks a person to become honest. The truth came out at the final board hearing, held in the sunlit atrium where the company displayed its inventions for visitors and school groups. Martin's scheme had been fully uncovered: altered access logs, planted evidence, investor manipulation, and a plan to sell the platform's licensing rights to a competitor after forcing Celeste out. He had not just tried to destroy her. He had tried to destroy the clinics waiting for that technology, the employees who believed in it, and me because I was convenient. When the board asked Celeste whether she had fabricated our engagement, she looked at me, and I felt the whole room waiting for another performance. Instead, I stood first. I said the engagement had begun as a shield, but the respect between us was not fabricated. I said the company did not need a woman to prove her stability by belonging to a man, and it did not need a working man to shrink so powerful men could feel safe. Celeste then removed the small temporary ring her public relations team had placed on her finger and set it on the table. She told the board she would not lead through deception, even deception born from fear. She said she had kissed me without consent from the truth, even if not from my heart, and she owed me more than an apology. She owed me the choice to walk away with my dignity untouched. Her voice trembled, but she did not break. I had seen many kinds of strength in my life, but that was the first time I understood that real strength is not never making mistakes. Real strength is standing in daylight and refusing to hide behind them. The board confirmed her leadership that afternoon, not because of any fiancé, but because the evidence proved her judgment had saved the company. After the hearing, I found her outside in the rooftop garden the employees used for lunch breaks. It was still daytime, the city shining below us, the wind moving through planters of lavender and rosemary. She was crying quietly, not like someone defeated, but like someone finally allowed to put down a weight. I told her I forgave her, but forgiveness did not mean pretending the hurt had never happened. She nodded and said she would understand if I left Waverly Innovations forever. I looked at the skyline, at the glass towers full of people pretending not to be lonely, and I thought of the man I had been before that morning, invisible because I had mistaken humility for hiding. I told her I was not leaving. I wanted my engineering work back permanently, with a real title, real accountability, and no favors dressed as romance. Months passed in the honest rhythm of daylight. The platform launched nationwide. Rural clinics began receiving supplies faster. My debts did not vanish overnight, but I could breathe again. Celeste and I did not become lovers because gossip wanted a pretty ending. We became friends first, then something steadier. We attended her father's rehabilitation sessions together during bright afternoons, where he learned to squeeze her hand twice for yes. We visited my mother's grave on a clear Sunday, and Celeste placed white tulips beside the stone without saying anything dramatic. She learned that I burned toast when nervous. I learned that she hated being called fearless because fear had been her constant companion. Slowly, without cameras, without board members, without a lie forcing our hands together, love became a choice we made in small, ordinary ways. A year after the kiss, Celeste gathered the company in the same atrium where I had once stood accused. Sunlight poured through the glass ceiling, touching the faces of technicians, analysts, receptionists, executives, cleaners, interns, and security guards alike. This time there were no accusations. There was only a new scholarship program for employees who wanted to continue their education, funded partly by recovered damages from Martin's case and partly by Celeste's personal shares. She asked me to help lead it, not as a symbol, not as a rescued man, but as someone who knew what it felt like to have talent buried under survival. When she finished speaking, she turned to me with a smile that still made my chest ache, and she took my hand in front of everyone again. No announcement. No performance. Just truth. Later that afternoon, in the garden above the city, I gave her a simple ring I had chosen myself, bought not to protect her image or satisfy a board clause, but to honor the life we had built after the lie ended. I told her I did not want to be her shield anymore. I wanted to be her partner. She laughed through tears and said yes before I finished asking. This time, when we kissed, no one gasped, no one plotted, no one needed saving. The sun was warm on our faces, and the whole world felt quiet in the way peace is quiet after a storm. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Before this story ends, tell our community in the comments what you believe is more powerful, a second chance, an honest apology, or the courage to stand beside someone when the whole world turns against them. Beckett and Celeste's love did not begin perfectly, but maybe that was the lesson. Sometimes life does not hand us clean beginnings. Sometimes it hands us a broken moment, a public mistake, a trembling apology, and asks what we will build from it. And in the bright ordinary days that followed, they built something stronger than reputation, sweeter than revenge, and deeper than the kiss that shocked a room full of strangers. They built trust, and from trust, they built home.